The world is hard on Keyonte George, and the league's making it even harder. Next on Locked on Jazz. Bum, 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 bum.
You are Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider, and this is Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. On today's edition, obviously some real-world stuff to talk about. Thoughts with Justin Zanuck. We'll touch on that in just a second. Scott Morrison running a nice autism program starting at tonight's game on World Autism Day. Keyonte George's world is tough, and the league is making it tougher. We'll look at some of the pick-and-roll stuff on Keyonte as well and see what we can look at for the rest of the season in that regard. First time, we're going to give you 5 draft names that are floating around as the Jazz get into draft position. And positionless awards are wrong for the history of the NBA. We'll touch on that as well today here on Locked on Jazz. I am David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked on Jazz. It's a daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thank you so much for making Locked on Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps. To the everydayers, thank you so very much for being a part of the program. And to all of you, yesterday left nice notes on our 13th anniversary of Locked on Jazz, which started as tip-off, probably had a bunch of other names along the way. I appreciate it. Guys, saw the notes from people who were back from Google Hangout days. I got a great email from Mitch who basically said, if we figured out yesterday on the show, for those who did not join the show yesterday, that somewhere we've done about 80,000 minutes of Locked on Jazz. And then Mitch emailed me to say that he's listened to 79,500. He refinanced through Steve Carter's. He bought cookies at the store. His parents have bought a Hyundai from Murdoch. Yep, that's being an everydayer, Mitch. We greatly appreciate you. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thanks to everybody who left nice notes yesterday on the YouTube chats or hit me on X. For the 13 years that we've been doing this program together, 2011 is when we started it. All right. First off, obviously, today, Justin Zanuck goes in for a kidney transplant. I'd call Justin a friend. Obviously, we work together, but we talk a lot. He's a super interesting guy. And so just best of luck to him and his family when what has to be obviously incredibly stressful and scary. And Justin's being amazing and stoic about it. I mean, he said it well when I talked to him on the phone the other day. He's like, hey, there's not a lot of choices here. Right? Like dialysis is not a great choice. So he's in kidney failure, and we wish him the best of luck. The medical science on some of this is just incredible. The one that blows me the most away is that they'll do the kidney transplant, and they just leave the old kidney. They unhook the old kidneys, and they rehook the new ones, and the other ones just kind of dissolve and go away. They don't take them out. I guess it's risky to take them out. So medical science is just incredible where we're advancing as a society. We have a tendency, I think, to be super grumpy, right? There's all these great studies right now that everyone's far more unhappy than they've ever been, et cetera, et cetera. And it's interesting of why, because we have amazing medical science advancements. We have incredible technological things. We have information to us. Maybe this is why all the time. This is an example of why we should all be just like in a great mood and thankful every day. Like this is something that, Justin's going to come out of this and can be fine. And his medical science is going to be amazing and do all sorts of, allow him to have a life. And that's, just something that we've advanced to this stage. It's pretty amazing. Certainly there are a bunch of things in the world right now where it feels like we're not advancing. I get it. But this is one where I think we can be really positive and feel uplifted on it. Another real world note, Scott Morrison of the Jazz, who is one of our favorites and we use on the broadcast all the time, has a 4-year-old autistic child and son, and he is going to so he is starting a campaign to raise autistic awareness. Joe did such a great job with this over the time as well, and so it's nice to to have him doing this again or having this back. Unfortunate, parenting task, I guess is what I would call it. I don't want to call it a burden. Every kid brings their own value. But this is a really nice program. And they'll be wearing custom sneakers throughout the month to raise autism awareness. Scott's an incredible guy. So anything you can do to support that. All right, let's get to basketball, which, feels a little funky. I agree today. And we're all just part of really, truly, you're a part of it too. We're all part of this kind of traveling circus family that is Utah Jazz basketball. You're in it as a fan, as someone who cares passionately about these people. And I'm in it, someone who works with all of them. And it just, the real world does kick in every now and then. So there's just a ton on Keyonte right now. And, he's 14 of his last 53, I think. He's 5 of his last 33 from 3. That coincides with Lauri not playing. Earlier this year when Lauri was gone for that stretch of like 8 games, Keyonte shot 37% from the field and 32% from 3. Like when there's not Lauri around, and then there's not Lauri and JC around, the burden on Keyonte is an awful lot, maybe too much, frankly. And so I think we have to be very kind of, at least in my opinion, we have to be very kind of understanding. I actually would like to flush watching Keyonte play in any game without these guys out of my memory, because I think it's hard to like recency bias. You watch it and you're like, yeah, the ball needs to go in, right? Like at some point you're like, okay, the ball needs to go in. On the other end, like, yeah, you're the playing point guard on a team without options, and you're right now, you're like, it's not lying 39% from the field and 33% from 3 on the season's a little nerve-wracking. The data's not real great on surviving that. But you have to kind of understand where it's coming from and what's happening with it. And I think that is a part of it. The other thing that's happening here, and his splits are not dramatically different. He started the year struggling on this a little bit, but if you look at Keyonte from pre-All-Star break to post-All-Star break, he's 39%. His three-point shooting pre is 35%. His post is 30%. That could be fatigue. The number that jumps out to me a little bit, and it's not dramatic, but in the 50 games pre-All-Star break, he was shooting about 3 free throws a game. And in the 18 games since, he's down, I think he's down a tad. But the other thing that's happened is the rules have changed. Actually, he's right about the same now, actually, because he had a big free throw game the other night, so he got it back up. The rules have changed, and the rules are not helping Keyonte. Like, don't tell me the rule. Like, there's no doubt here. League offense was at 116. Okay? 116 points per 100 possession for the year. League offense, or at the All-Star break, league offense was at 116.4. The previous month prior, the month of January, league offense was at 117. And since then, the league's offense is at 114.4. So 2 things. One is the trend is actually that March goes up. Okay? So if you go back in the history of the league, every year offense in the NBA for March goes up. So if we had been, and I did a show on this, if we had been trending the way we were supposed to be, March would have been a 119 or in that range. Instead, March itself was a 114.8. We've been 114.4 since the All-Star break. So we just sliced 3 points per game out of each team's offense when the league started. And the way we've done it is by not calling fouls. We're just not calling fouls. It's a bloodbath when you drive to the basket right now. And the data's there. The foul rate in the month of January there was 20 in foul rate. If you don't know that number, it's not a common number. It's how many free throws does the team take per 100 field goals? So teams are taking 20 free throws for every 100 field goal attempts. Well, they're now taking 17.7. So we've literally just taken 1 or 2 fouls out of the game a night. Well, who's that impacting? Normal size guards. It's not impacting Luka. He's so damn big, he just gets by everything. But it's impacting Key. So Keyonte's got the tough world that he's won a rookie. 2, he's trying to play without Lauri, which seems to be a lot for struggle for him. And 3, the league rules are now going against him. And we can go a little bit more of a deep dive if you want to on this. I'll bet you I could pull it up. Is, what the points per drive is pre-All-Star break, post-All-Star break, or just month of January, month of February. Like, it's I promise you, it's not even close because you're driving. And then I do think it's starting to impact shooters because of the fact that you aren't getting uh you aren't getting as deep into the paint and the kick out. I'm doing it right now. We're going to do this together. So for the season, which is kind of a somewhat irrelevant number, the points per drive is 1.02. So if we take this and let's just do the month of January, because that's when things got most explosive, and then we decided that we had to change things. If we do the month of January, so January 1 to February 1, points per drive in the NBA was 1.04. Points per drive in the NBA for March. And I think there's a huge impact on this, by the way, on like who you think the title favorite should be. Find teams that don't drive to the basket, because now maybe that's the way playoffs are going to be called anyway. But points per drive are 1.00. 006. So maybe you round it up. So we've literally gone from 1.04 points per drive to 1.0 points per drive in every game in the NBA. So for Keyonte, when he's driving the basket, he's not getting that foul call anymore. He's not getting that same. And as a rookie, it's discombobulating. It's truly discombobulating. I don't know what the isolation numbers are. I'd be curious on that, because isolations and drives are somewhat similar. ISOs you're coming with a little bit more of a one-on-one. Isolation drives for the month of March. I'm now doing it. You guys now have me in the rabbit hole of hell of stats. For the month of March, the isolation drives were 0.97. The month of January, the isolation drives were 0.996. So 1.0. So we're taking 0.03 points off isolations too. We're just not calling fouls anymore. I don't like it. So it's really hard on Keyonte right now. I think we have to be understanding of that. But let's look at some of his pick and roll partners and what maybe he can do here in the last 6 games to help with that. Then we'll hit some draft names. And I might be a grump. I don't mean to be a grump. I've just become like maybe an old guy. 13 years doing the show. No, I don't love positionless awards. I'll explain why. Or whatever word I have up on our screen. Next, as we continue. We're just getting started here on Locked on Jazz. Today's edition of Locked on Jazz is brought to you by Murdoch Hyundai, located at 4646 South State Street, also located in Logan and in Linden. It's the great lineup of Hyundai cars. The Hyundai EVs are killing it right now. There's all these stories out there. If you read New York Times and New York Times Daily and all these other stories about EVs. Well, not for Hyundai, because the Ioniq 5 and the Ioniq 6 are amazing. And they are killing it on sales right now on the Hyundai sales of the 5 and the 6. I own the 5. It's absolutely fabulous. Yesterday, I parked next to a 5 for the first time ever. They're kind of all over the place. Now, plus you've got the great lineup of SUVs. The Kona is the little one, moves to the Tucson, then the Santa Fe, and the beautiful Palisade. All over at Murdoch Hyundai. The new building at 4646 South State Street is fabulous. Also in Logan and in Linden. Check out Hyundai. If you're looking for a car right now, let me give you the VIP experience over at Murdoch Hyundai. Email me first at dlock09@gmail.com. That's dlock09@gmail.com. And we'll get you a VIP meeting with Murdoch Hyundai so that you can have the absolutely best experience that you deserve as an everyday. It's Murdoch Hyundai. It's the great lineup of cars. Make sure you reach out and get that taken care of. Today's show is also brought to you by Game Time. If you're looking for tickets for Major League Baseball, or if you're looking for tickets for upcoming NBA playoffs, or if you're looking for tickets just for a local NBA game or a concert, Game Time is the app for you. All high-profile events and Major League Baseball games going on for you everywhere. If you may be going traveling to go see a game somewhere, they're all it's the best way to do it. Why? Because the app features things like customize your spot, which gives you certain spots you want to be, flash deals, zone deals, and every kind of view from your seats, lowest price guaranteed. It's all at Game Time. You can save up to 60% on buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, flash deals, zone deals, all-in pricing, seat views. This is why Game Time is so great. Here's even better. $20 off when you use the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's $20 off if you use the code LOCKEDONNBA. Download the Game Time app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps. Greatly appreciate it. It is time for you to make the switch. If you have got your TV on ESPN or Fox Sports all day long, and you have to turn down the volume because they're yelling and screaming at you, make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 streaming sports channel driven by the local experts of Locked On with the biggest stories, all without the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or free Amazon Fire channel apps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. It's Locked On Sports Today, YouTube or Amazon Fire TV. All right, let's look at Key's pick and roll stuff. It's interesting. So for the season, he has run the most pick and rolls with John Collins, and I don't have this up entirely, but I'm going to guess, well, I can probably pull it up. They are the worst pick and roll combination in the NBA. It's really interesting. John is largely playing because of the fact that he spaces the floor, does more, which are all accurate, does more things offensively, etc. For the offense. And he is, and they just have not connected this year. That whatever, John's a really good roller on the pick and roll, but they have not figured it out together. Their number is 0.77. They've run 409 picks together. Let's take a quick look of all the 80 pairs that have run 300 picks together this year. Keyonte and John are last in the NBA. Yeah, I saw the number. It didn't surprise me at all. Okay, so now let's see. What about Walker? He's much better with Walker. He's at 0.89 points per pick and roll with Walker. Still not great, but it's better. His best pick and roll partner was Kelly Olynyk. His second best pick and roll partner is Lauri Markkanen. Pick and pops, gives him some space. He and John's probably more of a roller. Walker's more of a roller. So the pop big gives Keyonte a little bit more space and makes it better for him. And the pop bigs are gone. Lowry's not playing. Kelly got traded. Okay. Like some of this, starts to make a little sense. And so what's pick now? And I asked Will Hardy about this the other day. Like, what does he have to do? Well, one of the things is Keyonte's got to slow down. He's got to let Walker come set. Let Walker read the defender, set the pick. Walker's got to set the pick. But that's the first part is you've got to read the pick, slow down, get the pick at the right time. These are the developmental things you're working on right now. And then part two of that is you've got to slow down enough so that you can let Walker get back in front of you. You want the roller to be in front of you on the pick and roll. And so that allows that's the developmental step. Again, we kind of forget this, I think, about Keyonte, but he hasn't been a point guard before. And so as Keyonte kind of is learning these things, these are the places where it takes place. Since Keyonte rejoined the starting lineup and been going up against starters, his pick and roll play with rolling bigs, so now against other bigs, usually good centers, has been poor. That has not been very good. It's 0.73 with John, 0.77 with Walker. Again, better with Lauri, better, post-trade deadline. There's no, he was actually of limited sample size. He's been okay with Omier on a few, but only with 28. So his three primary guys, he's better with Lauri. So this is where Key's got to come off these pick and rolls. First thing he's got to do is slow down at the point of the pick and let the pick get set. Second thing is he comes around the pick, make the read, and if they drop off him and they're giving him the three, then take that three. I don't care the circumstance, take the three. The next part of it is then coming around the pick and roll. Now you got to slow down and you've got to allow Walker to get out in front of you. Colin's gotten pretty good at this. And one of the things you're seeing with Colin every now and then is what's called the Gortat screen, where Walker comes back and screens a second time for Colin, and he gets a layup sneaking behind. And it's Marcin Gortat used to do this and set the back pick a second time, and they get through. And that allows Colin to get to the basket. Keyonte, you've seen it, and he's gotten blocked 2 times because he's too quick still. So it's just learning. These are all fine. These are all just learning pieces of the puzzle, things that Keyonte has to learn. But it is noticeable that the guy that Keyonte was best at and has the most success with is Lauri, who's not playing anymore, and with Kelly, who got traded because they opened the floor for him. So the numbers show it really, really vividly that the hardest thing for Keyonte right now in learning is how to play the pick and roll on a drive with a roller. And then the league rules have changed so that now you can get body bumped, hit, pow, taken off your course, that little runner he had going. Those are all gone right now. This is impacting everyone. Like Donovan may have a knee problem, but Donovan's numbers post All-Star break aren't good. Like we see Donovan tonight in Cleveland. I think there's something, Donovan's has not played a lot of games. He played 4 games in March. But if you just take him back to the All-Star break where all of a sudden smaller guards as strong as Donovan is, people can suddenly ride him. It's not great. I mean, we need to start, there needs to be a whole research project. It's probably not me. Maybe it is me. Starting to look at any guard under 6'4" and below, what's happened to them since the All-Star break. And see who's surviving and who's not. But it's not a surprise to me that Dallas is unstoppable right now. Luka Doncic is 6'9" and can get anywhere he wants to go at any time. And I would guess that, there's a few of these teams that are more half-court based teams whose offenses are probably, since the All-Star break, probably not quite as good. It matters. I mean, we'll just literally change the rules. So it's just a very big impact on individual players. And in this case, it's a very, very big impact on Keyonte. All right. First time, we'll take a look at some of the draft names. And we will take a look at what I think about this whole positionless all-star, which doesn't impact any of our players, but I do think it kind of matters a little bit. By the way, I'm just going to take a second here. The number 1, 2 in offense, number 1 and number 2 offenses in the NBA, number 1, 2, and 3 offenses in the NBA since the rule change are the Boston Celtics by a large margin, the Denver Nuggets, and the Dallas Mavericks. The 2 teams that drive the least of any 2 teams in the NBA are Boston and Denver. And then you have Luka, who's not going to be bothered by this. If you kind of go to who would be the next teams that are unbothered by this, it would probably be Indiana due to pace. I'm cherry picking here. And LA due to LeBron's size. Oh, those are the next 2 best offensive teams. Now, some of this is intent, right? Because if you go look at the worst offensive teams in the league since then, they're all teams that aren't trying to win and aren't trying to do a lot. So some of this is a little skewy in a weird way because of what we're seeing with who's competing and who's not right now. But it is worth noting that the number 1 and 2 offense, and Boston's offense is 7 points better than anybody else's since All-Star break, which is noticeable, are the 2 teams that drive the least. Just a thought. All right, five names for us to start for the draft for the first time to start looking at, and then a quick thought on positionless awards as well as we continue here on Locked On Jazz. Next episode of today's show is brought to you by BetterHelp. BetterHelp is convenient, flexible online therapy. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. There's a few things about BetterHelp specifically that are great. One is, online, so it's convenient. Flexible means you can make your schedules. 3 is if you find a therapist that you don't vibe with, you can switch it easily. That's maybe the biggest deal here of all, right? Is if you're interested in therapy, then how am I going to do it? Well, one of the hardest things right now is finding a therapist. People are feeling the need to talk to people right now, and getting a therapist is not an easy thing to do. So therefore, having something like BetterHelp where they can help you out and get you another is very, very important in this process. If you're starting to think about therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and to suit your schedule. So visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. That's BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. I view it as performance enhancing for the brain. So can you help yourself understand why you do the various things you do, why you end up in the same rut again, why you're making the same mistakes again? Use BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen today. I do greatly appreciate it. Thank you for those of you who spent the 13 years with us doing this silly show. All right, here are our first set of names, and we'll start breaking them down once the season's over. We're getting close. But the interesting and fun one for us this year on Locked On Jazz is the 5 players that are being talked about the most around the Jazz current 9th draft position, since Brooklyn keeps losing. Memphis won last night. I don't think that Memphis is going to win 4 more games the rest of the way. So I don't think we're getting to 7. We should get to 8. Are Dalton Connect out of Tennessee, Reed Shepherd out of Kentucky, Cody Williams out of Colorado, Isaiah Collier out of USC. Is it Jacoby? I think it is. Jacoby Walker out of Baylor. Yeah, Jacoby Walker out of Baylor. We can just go get another Baylor guy. So those are the 5 guys that are being mentioned the most around our draft position. The reason I say it's fun is there's a lot of video and we can go look at them and we can go take a chance of those right now. There is a kid out of the G League. There's 2 kids out of the G League that are also mentioned possibility in there as well. Ron Holland, and I don't know how to pronounce the other name. And then a kid on UConn, Stephen Castle, who's a point guard, shooting guard, has been kind of mentioned around there as well. So you can watch him this weekend. But it's kind of fun that we have these players that are at least being mentioned in the pot, in our area that we can go watch tape on. So many times it turns out you can't really watch it. ESPN's latest mock was done so long ago. I don't even think it's relevant if I remember correctly. I think it was like mid-February. So he doesn't have any of the tournament or any of that. But and really the other thing that's really clear on all these mocks is these guys are flip-flopping all over the place. Like Reed Shepherd's anywhere from 2 to 12. And things of that nature. And so I think that's, and you're seeing the same thing with Walker, anywhere from 5 to 12. I think this is because there is not the dominant, Victor Wembanyama, impressive names in this. This draft is clearly going to be kind of eye of the beholder, which I think moves people around a great deal. All right. So for the first time ever, the NBA is voting on all defensive team and all NBA as positionless. And I don't like it. I understand why we're doing it. We're doing it because last year Nikola Jokic was second team, and that seems silly when he's second best player in the league. And I get it because the game is a bit more positionless than it was in the past. I think it's a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction, but I think let's look at John Stockton for a second. So when I evaluate John Stockton's career in history, he's an 11-time All-NBA player, which is great. However, when you get into it, he, I believe, was only first team All-NBA once. And so in a negative sense, I look at John, if I'm evaluating him compared to other players in the history of the NBA, that would be a criticism of his, if you're into, let's be perfectly clear what we're talking about here. We're talking about if you're starting to rank, is he, is he the all-time greatest point guard of all time? Well, I'd look at it and say, okay, he was first team All-NBA in 1993 and 1994 and 94, 95, and that's it. Well, you can't be the greatest point guard of all time. Hear me out. Don't lose it. If you were only first team in these 2 years, and I think those might have both been years where Magic was out. And I think that's I actually think that's a super relevant critique of someone's career and their placement in the league. Well, what happens if John Stockton in 1992-93 had been positionless voting? Would John Stockton have suddenly, who was second team All-NBA, made first team All-NBA above somebody? Now, frankly, Mark Price beat him out that year, not Magic. And so I don't know that he makes it over Charles Barkley, Michael Jordan, Karl Malone, Akeem Olajuwon, or Mark Price. It's kind of disastrous that Mark Price got above him. But my point on that is, or let's say Patrick Ewing was second team All-League center that year behind Akeem Olajuwon. But really, Patrick Ewing was may have been the second best player in the league that year. In which case, Michael was in the league, so this isn't true, but just go with me. In which case, then Patrick Ewing's legacy doesn't look right because Patrick Ewing could have been another first team all thing, but he wasn't because of the fact that Hakeem Olajuwon was in front of him. And so in the case of, Stockton, I look at him at least and say, okay, he's a 2-time first team all NBA. Like, yeah, well, I probably can't have, if Steve Nash is a 3-time MVP or 2-time MVP, then I'm going to have to decide that that's better than just a guy who's 2-time. Okay. Like, that's just, in fairness, you can decide you don't like that evaluation. John's our guy. I got it. But like, that would be my evaluation. And so when I suddenly you start to evaluate players, like, well, maybe Patrick Ewing deserves to be in this discussion. He was the fifth leading scorer that year, and only Olajuwon scored more. And then we start to evaluate Patrick Ewing's, where he ranks all time. And while he's 7-time all NBA, he only is first team X amount of times. Well, if he was in this positionless world, he would have been first team a multitude of times, and we would think about him differently. So I don't love this. By the way, Patrick Ewing was first team all NBA once in his entire career. And now Jokic and Embiid, who will both be first team all NBA, which maybe is right, but Olajuwon, Ewing, Shaq, David Robinson, all in the same era, didn't get to do that. John Stockton with Magic Johnson in front of him didn't get to do that. First team this year will probably be Shea, Luka, Jokic, Giannis, and Anthony Edwards, because Joel Embiid's hurt. And so it won't be that big a deal. It'll actually become a bigger deal as you move down the list and you start to figure out whether Zion, LeBron, Jaylen Brown, Steph Curry, whoever's going to get left off third team is going to get their bid because of the fact that it's now positioned. And maybe that's even more important. Those players who would have been taken off the list completely and don't get all NBA honors are now going to get all NBA honors. You decide, but I don't love it. That is Locked on Jazz today. Jazz and the Cleveland Cavaliers. Donovan is back in town. He is scuffling. Donovan, in the last 7 games, shooting 37% from the field, 43 from 3, but really struggling from 2, just 17 points a game. He only played 4 games in the month of March. He's still awesome, but he is struggling. And Cleveland is struggling. Cleveland has lost 14 of their last 24 after starting the year 35 and 16. And they're living Donovan Mitchell extension hell this summer, which we now don't have to live, but that's where we would have been, depending on how you want to feel about it. So that is Locked on Jazz today. Thanks very much for tuning in. We now send you the first ever 24/7 national sports stream. Best of thoughts to the Zanuck family, to Justin, his 3 kids, his wife, Gina. We're all thinking about you today and wishing you the best.